Hey everyone, welcome back to The Current. This is another episode of Real Talk on Real Topics. My name's Bo, this is Curtis. We are happy to be here for another episode. And today is kind of fun because we put some feelers out via social media for some topics that maybe some of our listeners would like to hear us talk about. And one we got back was the 10 Commandments in today's society, which I thought was very interesting. It's a great question. I think just being in Christian culture and interacting with Christians and having conversations regularly with Christians, I think this is a pretty common question. I think a lot of times people are curious about how the 10 Commandments apply to today.
Yeah, I think that's really good. A lot of Christians want to know, how do I as a Christian relate to these 10 Commandments? And I think also it becomes a really big popular thing just because it's one of the most well-known parts of the Bible. When you talk about what you know the Genesis story, you know Jesus' resurrection, and people have heard of the 10 Commandments. And so, I think it becomes a big question. What do we as Christians do with these? How do we interact with them? What do they mean for us today?
Yeah, and even non-Christians, other people I talk to in the community that maybe don't go to church still understand that there are 10 Commandments. And a lot of times they think that's kind of what we're living by.
Yeah.
Those 10 Commandments, like keeping those commandments, which will be fun. It'll be fun to talk about what we do live by and see how these fit in for today. So maybe, it'd be helpful to start just reading the 10 Commandments. Maybe some of you haven't heard these, but Curtis is going to read the 10 Commandments for us, and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, that's great. And I think helpful just to place this in its story a little bit. You know, we have the Exodus going on, and Moses leaves, and he goes to Mount Sinai, and God gives him the law, gives him these things, and he comes back down with these 10 Commandments. So here Moses is talking to the people, and God delivers this. It says, "Then God spoke all these words," Exodus 20. "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. Do not have other gods beside me. Do not make an idol for yourself, whether in the shape of anything in the heavens above or on the earth below or in the waters under the earth. You must not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the father's sin to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing faithful love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commands. Do not misuse the name of the Lord your God, because the Lord will not leave anyone unpunished who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. You are to labor 6 days and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You must not do any work, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the foreigner who is within your gates. For the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and everything in them in 6 days. Then he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and declared it holy. Honor your father and your mother so that you may live a long life in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not give false testimony against your neighbor. And lastly, do not covet your neighbor's house. Do not covet your neighbor's wife, his male or female slave, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor." Boom, the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, and we've titled this episode "Thou Shalt Not," mainly because it's a lot of, like King James Version, a lot of people associate 10 Commandments with a bunch of rules.
Thou shalt not kill.
Yeah.
Thou shalt not covet. Yeah.
Exactly. So thank you for reading that. That's it's good. It seems like it's longer than 10 whenever we read it.
There's a lot more going on in there. Yeah.
But so there's 10 things that the Lord pretty much gives Moses that his people should not be doing. But you'll notice they're a little specific to that time period in some instances. And so, again, I think one of the main question we're going to answer today is how can something like that written so long ago apply to us today? Or should it even apply to us today? And so let's talk about this. Let's kind of dive in and kind of talk about how the 10 Commandments relate to today's culture. I'll start by saying I feel like the 10 Commandments have become elevated to a position sometimes that it shouldn't be. And not to say, let me be clear up front, I'm not saying these are not good principles to live by, because they are. Yeah. You should not kill. You should not covet. You should not, whatever
steal
else. Just go through the list. You're right. Those are things we should not be doing. But are the 10 Commandments the standard in which we live? I don't personally want to be checking myself against the 10 Commandments all the time. I think there's a better thing to check myself against.
Yeah.
That's Jesus, and that's kind of where we'll go with this, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
Because that then deeps dive into a bigger conversation about the Old Testament law.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of stuff in there, not just the Ten Commandments that they were supposed to follow as well, and they never could. So there's a new covenant with Christ. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I guess the short answer is that, it's a bit more complicated than, like, here, the Ten Commandments, keep them. When we read the Bible and we think, yep, it's all just sort of this flat thing giving us these rules to follow, and we read the Ten Commandments and say, yeah, this is what God wants. Now, I want to say, the Ten Commandments are good, that there's things that are true and it reflects real things. We shouldn't be people that are, coveting other people's wives and, like you said, stealing or murdering. Those things hold up. But I think you're right. Is it the best thing or the primary thing that Christians are supposed to be engaging with, and kind of the standard by which they're trying to live their life? And I think the big key to the Ten Commandment conversation is exactly like you said, is understanding it in terms of kind of its story, saying, hey, what's the Old Testament law? How does that fit in? And I want to say that when I look at the Ten Commandments, I look at it similarly like I do just the Old Testament law in general, or the law of Moses more broadly.
Maybe we should dive into like why that law was given. Like let's kind of explain the law of the Old Testament quick.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We need to understand, and this is something that even, if you're interested in this, go read the book of Galatians. This is great. Paul talks about it, and he kind of anticipates a similar issue in the Galatian community. He's talking about the law of Moses and said, hey, that's not really what we need to be following. That's not the main thing for us, is keeping these sort of things, these works of the law. And so some of these Jewish people are saying, well, why? Is the law bad then? Why did God even give us this law? And Paul says, no, the law was good. It does reflect good intentions on behalf of God, but it's not the end game. It's not really what we're looking for. And he uses the analogy of like a babysitter that gets a kid to school in the morning, a slave that was supposed to watch over the child and make sure it arrives at its right destination. And Paul says, that's kind of what the law is. It was given to us for this time. Excuse me. It was given to us to make sure the people of God could kind of stay on course until we arrive at what it was ultimately about, and that is the person of Jesus. And that's the argument that Paul makes too in Galatians. So for me, when it comes to talking about, the Ten Commandments, I just want to be a good Bible reader and say, okay, where does this fit in the story? How do I fit in this story? And where do those two things relate? Because we are not, ancient Israelites living under the old covenant law.
Yeah.
Moses isn't speaking to us. And while we can listen to and learn from these things, and like you said, there is some good stuff behind it, it doesn't mean that this is the gold standard for us today as Christians.
Yeah, that's really good. And like I said, I think it's important to really grasp what the Old Testament's intention was. Like you mentioned, I just want to spend a little bit. Like, God had this covenant with this group of people. And it was through this group of people that this Savior, this Messiah, was going to come and redeem not only their nation, but humanity. And that was always the promise. And so to kind of keep his people, he said, kind of on the right track, on the right path, there was this law that was given. But even Jesus himself, like you said, Paul mentioned, hey, like, the law isn't the standard anymore. But even Jesus himself, like he says, like, I came not to like abolish the law, but to fulfill it. Yeah, like I'm bringing it more purpose. Sure, it's this good thing. I don't want to just like. Jesus doesn't say, just neglect it completely.
No purpose.
Just like forget it in its entirety. But hey, there's something more now. Like something. Yeah.
And I think when we're looking even at the list of the commandments, I mean, by and large, it's the sort of stuff that you say this holds up. Like, we shouldn't have other gods before God. We shouldn't do those things. But I think one really great piece to look at to show, like, hey, this isn't exactly binding for us or not the perfect standard or the ideal, is when he's talking about remembering the Sabbath, keeping it holy, not working, all that sort of stuff. A typical Jewish understanding of that is a very traditional sort of Saturday Sabbath keeping, just like you would see in Judaism with no work. Now, I don't know any Christians that practice this sort of Sabbath keeping.
Sure.
It's not a 10 commandment they follow. Again, we come to understand this Sabbath law having fulfillment in Jesus and now on the Lord's Day and the rest we receive in him, and a good reminder to rest on the Lord's Day, and that's still a good thing. But we don't do that same sort of Sabbath law keeping that we see in the Ten Commandments. But that's good. Even Jesus himself has to push back against a little bit of that in his ministry and saying, hey, yeah, I'm gonna heal this guy on the Sabbath. That's worth it. People are more important.
Sure. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm going to heal on the Sabbath. Yeah. And he got in so much flack for that.
Yes.
Because he wasn't keeping the law, technically.
Right.
He's keeping his law, putting people above everybody else.
Yes.
Like, that was his heart. But
that's what he says. Man wasn't made for this. Sabbath's made for man. Man wasn't made for the Sabbath.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think that's really good. And I also wanted to just touch on briefly how I think a lot of times, too, like we talk about the Ten Commandments, the Old Testament law, this kind of comes up in a variety of other ways that still applies. And we can maybe save this for another episode, too. But just to give you another just kind of practical example of this that might be helpful and be able to relate to is like we get asked all the time, like, the Old Testament talks about this idea of a tithe, like this law of giving 10% to God. And it's very much an Old Testament idea. Jesus shows up, and then he cares more about your heart is what we see. He cares more about not necessarily how much. He even shares the little story, a parable about a lady who gives, and she gives, kind of really all she had. But anyway, Jesus says, like, this is what I'm after, is someone that's willing to give just out of joy from their heart, not for people to see and then clang your things.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, again, I think that's just another example of really what it's getting at here. Like, sure, like, is 10% a good goal? Sure.
Yeah.
Like, is it a good, like, foundation? Sure. But I know people that reverse tithe. They give 90% of what they make. And so there's just scenarios in which God may be calling you to more. Maybe he's calling you to less. And like really what we see in Jesus a lot of times when it comes to the law is he's more concerned about your heart and all that you do and less about keeping like the rules. You know what I'm saying?
It's
like
not.
He cares more about like what's going on in here than he does about, keeping all the rules right.
That's a great example. Yeah, in the Old Testament, you see this sort of commandment to tithe and sort of this 10% giving, but it's not something we see carry over into the New Testament. Yeah, rather there's this impetus to just, be generous, be giving. It's not did you hit your 10% quota? And we have all sorts of stuff like that. When it comes to Christians relating to Old Testament law and that sort of stuff, again, if we want to say, hey, all the 10 Commandments, we need to be on top of that, then I say, why aren't we keeping dietary law and all those sort of things? Now, some people want to divide the law into like 3 different parts of like civil and ceremonial and moral and say only one's keeping. I don't think this is a good way to break down the text, and I don't think it's totally fair to sort of the Jewish understanding of that law. Yeah. There's ways to do it, but for me, I just want to say no. Even as we look to the New Testament, James talks about this and stuff, talking about the new law that we have. We follow the law of Christ. We have a new covenant, and that's a big thing to say. It's like, again, not to say that everything was bad about the old covenant, that it didn't serve any purpose, that it didn't have any function. But there's a reason why one's old and one's new.
Yeah. I mean, I just thought about this, but this is probably an even more appropriate example, is Jesus addresses, like, hatred. And again, he cares more about what's going on in your heart. And he says, hey, if you have just hatred towards a brother or sister, you've committed murder.
Yeah.
Again, like where the Old Testament law says do not kill, Jesus is saying you have hatred for somebody, like you're essentially, in my eyes, you're committing murder. Like you're killing them. Yeah. Again, because he cares more about what's going on in your heart. Mm-hmm. Now, we shouldn't be killing people. Right. Obviously. But again, Jesus is just, he's all about the heart. And, that has a lot of implications. There's enemy love, there's things like that. Well, you can't love somebody and simultaneously want to kill them. So it's not possible. So again, it starts with what's happening on the inside. And that's what Jesus is really ultimately concerned about. And he wants us to be transformed kind of from the inside to where we fulfill the law. Yes. But not focus on the law. Yeah. It's it's just happening naturally out of a transformation of like the Spirit's work inside of us. If I see somebody that I have an issue with that maybe I want to harm or some way, but if I were able to view them, as a brother or sister in Christ, or as somebody that's loved and cherished by God, or as somebody that I deeply care about and love, even though they don't deserve it, I'm far less likely to want to harm them.
You bring up a great point. In a lot of ways, Jesus goes and kind of strengthens the law. He's like, hey, you're worried about the outward action of harming someone. No, I'm worried about, what's going on under the hood? Are you hating this person? And I think even looking at what Jesus does with Moses' command to, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, Jesus, makes this even stronger. Before, I think this is kind of curbing retaliation. We're not going to respond disproportionately. It's not going to be 5 teeth for one, here, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And Jesus, I think, strengthens this and goes beyond it and says, you've heard it said that, but I tell you, love your enemy, pray for those who persecute you. Wants to go and strengthen it and make that even more intense. And so sometimes we follow Moses, we're not going far enough yet to following Jesus, and that's an important thing to understand too.
Yeah. And, I encourage you to read the Gospels, if you're a listener and you're intrigued by this, because Jesus himself, who's always the standard, Jesus himself, like we mentioned, like he healed on the Sabbath, and that was a big no-no, But again, he considered people above any of the laws that, he was supposed to keep. He got in trouble a lot with the religious leaders because he wasn't following the law. But that just goes to show you he's concerned about something far deeper. He's concerned. He has a heart somewhere else rather than keeping a bunch of rules. And I think that's unfortunately what the Ten Commandments have come for a lot of people. And that's what I encourage you, if you're a Christian and you're so concerned about keeping the Ten Commandments, just kind of release that and just allow God to show you some grace there. And again, be more intentional about maybe where your heart is, where your heart lies. And then I think you'll be surprised how well you keep the commandments when you're focusing on allowing the Holy Spirit to just transform you.
I think as you're just looking to pursue and follow Jesus, you'll naturally begin to follow these, I think, commandments in the right and sort of proper way.
Sure.
It's
kind of a result, not the focus.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's a good way to put it. And it is whenever, again, coming back to reading the Bible, I always want to tell people, like, we got to understand that what we're reading is something that's happening in the context of a broader story. And we find ourselves in a particular part of that story. And so just being good and understanding, like, okay, I understand this is something going on in this old covenant time, and how does this relate to me now might be a little bit different. And like we've been saying this whole time, that's not to say there's no value, throw it all out, but just to engage with the Ten Commandments as Christians means prioritizing Christ.
Yeah, absolutely. And I used to read the Bible that same way. I used to open and be like, how does this apply to me? But then I learned, like, that's not the best way to read the Bible. The best way to read the Bible is what were they saying to them in that time period, and then how can I learn from what God said to them?
Exactly.
Because what he said to them is not necessarily what he's saying to me. Now, it might apply, but yeah, it's just being a good Bible reader. And we mention that all the time on this podcast, so hopefully that's a theme that you'll kind of grab onto.
Yeah.
We don't just read the Bible one way all the time. It's very much like we're trying to read it the best we can, and there's different, types of literature all throughout the Bible. It's not just like a textbook about, science and history. Like, it's just facts, and like, it's not, anyway, again, the Bible's great.
Yes.
Yeah, we want to read it the best that we possibly can.
Yes, so. Exactly.
And that's always really, I don't know, I feel like a lot of the episodes come back to that kind of thing. It always kind of circles back to like how you view the scriptures. But yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think we did the best we can here, talking about the Ten Commandments, and yeah, it was a fun episode. And again, we're always open to ideas that you might have as far as topics, things you want to hear. Yeah, we not that we're running out. It's just it's good to know what our audience is interested in.
Yeah, so we appreciate and want to make content that is engaging for you, and we want to know what are the things that are pressing and what are the real topics that you want to be able to hear from?
Yeah, I think if it were up to me, I'd probably talk about Jesus and sports, but
that would be interesting.
That's probably not how they go together, separately.
Oh, okay.
I'd have a bunch of episodes on Jesus and have a bunch of episodes on sports, but
does Jesus dictate the outcome of sporting events? Next episode.
Oh my gosh, that would be a good one. Well, we kind of already addressed that. I used to write Philippians 4:13 on the top of my hat when I was playing baseball.
That's right. You can do all things through Christ.
I can do all things. Including hit that ball, baby.
That's right.
Okay, we're losing it. All right. Thanks for joining with us for another episode of The Current. We'll see you next time right here. Grace and peace.